The Vegas Golden Knights know how to make a splash. The talk of the town, a massive sign and trade with the Toronto Maple Leafs for Mitch Marner. This time on City Beat, we're breaking down the acquisition and what it means for the guys in gold. Don't go anywhere because SCB starts right now.
From Las Vegas, this is City Beat.
I'm your host, Mike Davis. Thanks so much for joining us here on City Beat. City Beat is the show that dissects the Vegas sports world through the eyes of the sports reporters and storytellers leading the charge. This time we're exploring the Vegas Golden Knights offseason, specifically the sign and trade for right winger Mitch Marner that gives a lot of momentum to this team and made waves throughout the NHL. Joining the action on the panel today, we have Case Kiefer, assistant sports editor of the Las Vegas Sun, Jesse Granger, reporter for The Athletic and NHL Network, and first-timer Paul De Los Santos, writer for NHL.com. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. So let's start with this. Last week on City Beat, we discussed the likelihood of Mitch Marner coming to the desert, and eventually VGK acquired the ultimate prize of free agency in a sign and trade deal. Now, the Golden Knights completed an 8-year, $96 million deal for the 28-year-old right winger who's led the league, the NHL, fifth in scoring last season. So, Jesse, what was your initial reaction to the deal?
Initial reaction is it's a heck of a deal for the Golden Knights. When you look at what Mitch Marner could have commanded on the open market, and I've heard some teams were willing to offer him as high as $14 million, maybe even $15 million a year. For the Golden Knights to get him for $12 million a year, it looks great right now, and it should only look better as the salary cap continues to rise. We've been stuck in a flat cap for a few years where these salaries haven't been depreciating the way they normally do. We're going to get to see some much bigger bumps up the next couple years. That $12 million will look even better by the end of it. Like you said, one of the best scoring wingers in the NHL. $12 million a year is obviously the most a Golden Knights player has ever been paid, but it's still relatively small for a player of his caliber.
A big deal. I mean, this is definitely the top prize of free agency. Case, your initial reaction? I know this was something last week. We were even talking about potential tampering and all this stuff, but eventually we got the guy.
Yeah, I hate to keep repeating myself and saying the same thing, but I agree totally with Jesse. I think one thing in all professional sports, not just hockey, is there's not enough scrutiny on just how much these finances mean and just how much that little difference it makes. I think $12 million a year, especially with the rising cap, makes it so this is going to be a surplus value contract, especially early on. If you let him get to free agency, it hurts a lot to lose Nick Waugh for basically nothing, who was a useful player. But he hits free agency, he gets to $14 million, which I had wrote about speculated. That flips the whole math the other way to where he's going to have to hit an even higher level to where he played to live up to that contract. Getting him in at that $12 million annual average value, to me, it makes me sign off on the deal and kind of feel like the Golden Knights did it again, that they got their guy and they did it smartly.
8 years, he's a 28-year-old, Paul. What do you like about this? What do you have anything negative on it, potentially?
You know, really nothing negative in terms of like the contract. I mean, it's just like you said, they lose, like Case said, they lose Nick Waugh. But at the same time, you look at what they value and they gain. They gained a valuable winger, which was their biggest area of concern coming into the offseason, and they dipped into their area of strength. So it's kind of, there's nothing really bad in that deal. And the $12 million a year, like Jesse and Case said, was really big. But I think the most valuable thing was that 8th year. I think, you know, like Kelly said during his press conference, that Kelly McCrimmon said, that there was a lot of like that 8th year they valued because it does lower the annual average value of the contract. So getting that 8th year through the sign and trade was very valuable. I think that actually adds to the value of the contract, getting that 8th year to lower the AAV.
Okay, last thing here, Jesse. I mean, the partnership, him alongside Jack Eichel, what the excitement that tandem could bring to the table. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's funny. Someone asked that question to Kelly McCrimmon during his press conference.
That was you?
See,
I'm a lot like Case.
He said, well, someone's going to have to pass the puck. And he's half joking, but someone's going to have to shoot the puck. And he's half joking, but it is serious that these are two players that are not shoot first. They are pass first. Yes, they are playmakers. They like to set other guys up. They like to pass the puck. If those two do end up playing on a line together, whoever the third player on that line is, bet the over on their goal total for the season. Just head to the front of the net. The puck will find you. You're going to have a lot of easy goals, whether that's Ivan Barbashev, Pavel Dorofeev, or probably the two most likely left wingers. If those two end up playing together, But I mean, we're talking about two of the best passers in all of the NHL. Even if they don't play on the same line at even strength, they're going to be together on the top power play unit. There's going to be a lot of lateral passes across what they like to call the golden road, setting up the best opportunities you'll see in hockey. And it's hard to find players better at it than Eichel and Marner. It's going to be fun to watch them at the same time.
Jesse said it right there. Guys, after all of this drama with the massive sign and trade deal, where does Vegas rank? Are the Golden Knights favorites to win the Cup? We have more on that after the break.
You're watching Sin City Beat.
Welcome back to Sin City Beat. Well, the Golden Knights are locked and loaded with a brand new shiny toy in Mitch Marner. So where do they rank in the league? Case Kiefer, is this team the top contender for the Cup after the Marner acquisition?
Golden Knights fans aren't going to like this answer, but I have to say no. I think just for next season, this doesn't really, to me, improve a lot of where they were this year. They're always going to be in the mix. That's where you want to be in hockey. I think we've been spoiled now these last 2 years. It's been Panthers, Oilers, but usually there's a lot of variance in the playoffs. They're going to have a chance when they get there, but you look at the betting market. I think before they got Mitch Marner, they were as high as 16-1 to win the Stanley Cup next year. They went all the way down to 7-1 after that at some sportsbooks. I know some of that's the local influence, but that's a little much for me. We got questions elsewhere on the roster. They probably had arguably the best blue line going into last season. It's not going to be that way this year without Pietrangelo. So there are some questions. They're in the mix, but not quite the top favorite to me.
Interesting. Jesse, I see you nodding. Is that you're nodding in unison with Case, and why do you feel that way?
Yeah, I feel similarly in terms of, I think they're obviously loaded up front at forward, and the Marner acquisition makes that even stronger, but missing Pietrangelo is a huge, huge piece that I don't know if it's giving quite the credit that it, or the impact that it will have. He has been the workhorse for this team, and while they do have talented defensemen, Shea Theodore, Noah Hannafin, neither of them has ever taken on the role of the workhorse defenseman that eats up all the minutes, that plays the toughest matchups. They're kind of more offensive guys. They don't play together. They've never played together before. So that also means that more than likely either Braden McNabb or Zach Whitecloud is going to be playing top line minutes for the first time in their entire career. Braden McNabb will be 35 this year. He's a great defenseman. He's coming off of probably his best season as a Golden Knight, but he's never played 25 minutes a night against the toughest competition. That's a lot to ask for a guy in his 12th, 13th year in the NHL. And Zach Whitecloud, same thing. He hasn't had to have that type of responsibility. So it's a big step up. I still think this is a very good team. I think they absolutely are in the mix for teams that can win the Stanley Cup, but they aren't as solidified as maybe Dallas, for example, who's got superstars at every level of the team.
Interesting. No, so Paul, your biggest concern with this team?
Oh, it has to be the blue line. I think, you lose Alex Pietrangelo. And you also, I think, one that flew under the radar is losing Nick Hague, because he did play alongside Pietrangelo. So you essentially lost your top pair in stretches of the season. So it's really, you're looking at it like that first, Jesse mentions the first pair. You also got to look at the third pair, because the second pair is going to be Whitecloud and Hannafin, who have essentially played those types of minutes. But then you look at the third pair. Caden Korczak going to see the most action he's ever seen in his career. Then it goes with the top pair, going back to Jesse's point. McNabb or someone else is going to have to step up and eat the 25, 27 minutes, whatever Pietrangelo average. I think it's close to 25. I think, truthfully, it really makes it difficult for me to project how well the blue line will do, because it is more geared, a little more offensive minded to a degree than it was before when you had Pietrangelo Hague, where it was a little more steady defensively.
Do you think McCrimmon and Cassidy, do they feel that these guys can fill that void? Is that the sentiment you feel from them, Case?
They're going to have to. I feel like there could be a lot worse situations. Both, I feel like Shea Theodore and Noah Hannafin, to me, from stretches have shown that they're capable. The question is going to be consistency, doing it 82 games every night. So, the great thing about the Mitch Marner acquisition to me is it lengthens how long you can conceivably see them winning the Stanley Cup. It doesn't necessarily make them make a huge leap into next year. This front office, they've been good about figuring things out, see what it looks like on the ice, make some moves, and maybe you're right back there.
So let me just ask this, because I know we're talking a lot about Marner. We're going to be talking coming up about some of the other moves that this team should do. But Jesse, just educate me for a second. The Marner acquisition, because there's so many question marks, because last block we were talking about how they're both playmakers, somebody's got to want to shoot the puck. In their eyes, was this the affinity, the desire for a guy like Marner? Does it make sense to the rest of the league? Or is VGK and McCrimmon and Cassidy, are they cooking up something that doesn't make sense league-wide?
I will say that I have heard rumblings that there are GMs that are maybe not quite as concerned with the Golden Knights as they have been in the past because of the loss of Pietrangelo. And while Marner does make them a better team, does it make them a more complete team? There are questions, and like you mentioned, the pass first players, they don't have a lot of shooters. They lost Jonathan Marchessault, so he was the most clutch goal scorer on this team. Whenever you needed a shot out on the net, you could count on him.
But what other areas does this team need to address before the season starts? The panel has that answer next. Mitch Marner is now the highest paid player on the team. That is before center Jack Eichel signs his new deal with the team. Now, Nicholas Waugh was shipped out to Toronto in the deal, and defenseman Nicholas Hague is now a member of the Nashville Predators. Plus, the team will be without Alex Pietrangelo, as we've spoken about, as he undergoes a bilateral femur construction, which might push him towards retirement. Now, GM Kelly McCrimmon announced the signing of a trio of forwards, Raphael Lavoie, Jonas Rondberg, and Cole Schwint. So, Paul, tell us what other moves, or Schwint, I should say. Paul, what other moves do the Knights need to make before the season starts?
Now, there is a difference between need and want. If I was to say need, I'd probably maybe a backup goalie. I mean, it depends on how much you trust Akira Schmid. I think that was the biggest question. You know, Aiden Hill is the starter net. There's no question. But it's a matter of, like, can they get someone who can eat up games to prevent Hill from playing 60? Because we see over the course of a season, you need a goalie to get some rest. Because, you know, I think it was an early criticism of Connor Hellebuck is that he played too many games in the regular season.
Gotcha.
He played probably Jesse can correct me if I'm wrong, he played his least number of games this year, probably one of his better seasons, not only just in the regular season, but also in the playoffs. So, you know, backup goalies are a value to many teams. So if they can have a goalie who can play 25 to 30 games, it would help this team a lot for Aiden Hill's health and also just to keep them fresh for the run in June, May and June.
That's an interesting point. Now, Case, I mean, so backup goalie, that's where Paul's head's at. Blue line, filling the void of Pietrangelo. I know we keep mentioning a lot of guys that we feel should step up into that role. Can we start looking elsewhere in free agency, more trades? Is there that optionality still there for the blue line? What's your concern? And what about cap space? At what point are we going to start talking about that? Because it sounds like between this new deal with Marner and then adding the eventual new contract with Jack, that's going to be problematic as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're up against it right now, but they're always up against it. I think they're always up towards the top of the salary cap. So I think kind of what you see right now is largely what you're going to get. I think there's only kind of incremental improvements you can make or additions. I mean, the free agency swarm is basically over. I did think, like Paul said, that they probably would have signed another one of these veteran goalies by now to be a backup. I thought the writing was on the wall. They've done that. That hasn't happened, so maybe you do it there. I know the fans, I'm still getting hit up about trades, that they think they're going to trade for another big-name defenseman. I don't know if that's going to happen immediately. I never shut this team out from potentially upgrading, doing things during the season. But I think largely what you see now is what you're going to get, and it's only going to be small things from here on out.
All right, Jesse, what about you? What's your 2 cents on this?
I think I leave the possibility open for a trade. We've seen some rumblings that Rasmus Andersson, he's a great defenseman. He played with Noah Hannafin in Calgary. He is entering the final year of his contract. It looks like he doesn't want to re-sign with Calgary. The Flames have explored the possibility of moving him, and there are reports from Pierre LeBrun that Rasmus Andersson has told them, I will only sign an extension with the Golden Knights. That's the only team I'll sign an extension with. So I'm not saying the Golden Knights are going to trade for him, but I think that there are options out there now. As Case said, the salary cap, they're at the limit already, and the roster limit with these 3 signings. They're capped out both in number of players and in money spent. So they would have to ship out quite a bit of money in order to bring in a player like that. But other than that, I think what Paul mentioned about backup goalie, I think what they're kind of doing is they trust Akira Schmid to be the guy, but also I think they're leaving the possibility open that there are a few veteran backup goalies out there that haven't signed deals. Ilya Samsonov, who was here last year.
Right.
Also Alexander Georgiev, who's been a starter in the past. James Reimer, who's coming off of a really good year, even though he's getting up there in age. I think those 3 guys, the Golden Knights are probably going to keep tabs on, especially Georgiev and Reimer, and if they don't get a deal that they like from another team, I think there's a chance they could get one of them on the cheap and say, hey, come play for a good team, play behind a good team, maybe sign a 1-year deal, have an impressive season, and you can make yourself a contract next year. So I wouldn't put the possibility of a trade for a defenseman or adding a last-minute veteran goalie. I wouldn't put it past him.
Well, you know, it's always a treat when you have Jesse Granger talking about goalies, because what Cesar Millan did for dogs and how he's the dog whisperer, that's what you really are with goalies. I mean, he literally is covering goalie beats for The Athletic and NHL.com, NHL Network, all that kind of great stuff. So good stuff there. Let me just ask this before we go to the break. There's a sentiment, a shared sentiment throughout the league, it seems, with a lot of players. Like, you know, Marner, this was his desired location. We're now starting to hear, like you were saying about Ramses, there's all these players that their desired location, their trade destination that they want to arrive at is Las Vegas. Case. I mean, that's such a privileged place to be in the big four sports leagues. I mean, in the NHL, for Vegas to be the desired destination, how big of a deal is that, and what should fans just know and appreciate about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely wild. You just take this back a few years ago, you never would have seen this coming. I know I'm opening a whole nother can of worms, but now you're seeing other teams are getting a little frustrated by it and, you know, wanting to maybe change the states with no state income tax. It's such a huge advantage. I mean, 10 years ago, no one wanted to play for like the Panthers or even the Lightning. Now, guys want to re-sign with the Panthers. They want to come to the Golden Knights.
So that plays a big part.
Yeah, these franchises are smart, and they are making use of living in a great place that a lot of people want to live with a lot of advantages, and that lower tax rate, I think, is no small talking point.
All right, guys, don't go anywhere, because after the break, we're going to explain the Marner deal in NFL terms. Whose is the top wingers football equivalent? We're going to be breaking that down after the break. Okay, welcome back to Sin City Beat. So we like to have some fun here on this show. Producer James and I, we like to come up with some creative ways to discuss and digest the biggest sports stories. For instance, the deal for Mitch Marner, the theme of the show, right? We've been talking about him all show long. Well, he's widely considered the top prize of NHL free agency, a guy who was the 5th leading scorer last season with 102 points, yet he's somewhat an unknown commodity in a lot of regular NHL fans' minds. So in NFL terms, I'd like to know who we could equate Mitch Marner to, just to drive home the significance of this deal. So in terms of impact, talent, and skill, Case, who's the NFL equivalent for Mitch Marner?
All right, I probably put a little too much thought in this. My first reaction was he can't be a quarterback, because in Toronto, he clearly was the second guy, I think, behind Austin Matthews, who won the Hart. I think you can make a case that he's going to be the guy here. I would still go Jack Eichel. I think Eichel probably should get paid a little bit more than him. And I think as far as scoring, and when you say someone's got to shoot, I think it's ultimately going to be Eichel. So then that kind of flipped me back that maybe he should be the quarterback, because I think he's going to be even more of a passer. I think he's probably a little bit better passer than even Jack Eichel. So my first reactions on the receiver front were maybe like a Jamar Chase, a CeeDee Lamb that hasn't been quite to the top. But then I started thinking, okay, he's getting paid like it. He's clearly one of the top guys. He's probably in that second-tier quarterback range. I started to think of a guy that's super talented but hasn't got it done in the playoffs. I started to get a little bit of criticism. So I ultimately landed on Justin Herbert, and I'm interested to see what these guys think of that one.
Okay, my mind is spinning. We're all over the place, but that's a very big name. And Justin Herbert. So, okay, fascinating insight there. Jesse, what about you?
I was kind of thinking the same as Case in terms of a quarterback who's, when you think of Mitch Marner as a hockey player, the first thing that you think of, because of the narrative around the Toronto Maple Leafs, is not getting it done in the playoffs. He's incredibly talented. He's the best. To me, I'll give you two names, Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford.
Wow.
And I say that because they're two guys who, Prescott's kind of in his career right now where Matthew Stafford once was when he was on the Lions, where he was a top pick coming out of college. Everyone knows how much arm strength the guy's got. He's so good, but he's never done anything in the playoffs. And then all of a sudden he goes to the Rams and wins a Super Bowl. I think that's what the Golden Knights are hoping happens with Mitch Marner. Dak Prescott obviously hasn't gotten that yet, but to me, that's how I view him, as the top dog on a team that he's very talented, clearly a great player, but he hasn't gotten it done in the part of the hockey season that all hockey fans love watching the most. Marner hasn't been a star, so I think for the Golden Knights' sake, they're hoping it ends up like the Matthew Stafford story.
And just before I go to the poll, why hasn't he been a star? Why is the Mitch Marner name not as present amongst fans' minds, like a Draisaitl, a McDavid, an Austin Matthews. Do you have any reasoning behind that? Why he's a little bit more below the radar?
I think just the lack of playoff success. And he doesn't score the goals that Austin Matthews scores. They're obviously on the same team, and Matthews is a bigger star than Marner is. He scores the goals. I think that has a lot to do with it. But Toronto is just such an enigma. They're such a talented team. They're so good every year, and yet they fall flat on their face in the playoffs every year, and they find a new, more creative, more embarrassing way to do it each year. So I think whether it's to put that all on Mitch Marner is not fair. But because he's one of the top players on that team that's happened to, that's what he's associated with.
Gotcha. All right, Paul, who are you likening? I mean, I'm done with the salsa verde and the guacamole. We gotta go to some NFL names. So tell me, who are you likening him to? Who do you equate Mitch Marner to in the NFL?
You know, I mean, going with Case and Jesse, they view him as a quarterback. But I'm just like thinking, if you play him with Eichel, like, you know, you look at the center as the quarterback. Like, he's going to start the play and everything like that. So I'm going with that direct comparison that if you think about if Eichel is going to be the quarterback, if he plays with Eichel, you know, I was thinking, what would be the equation to? Well, it would be a wide receiver, which Case brought up. So I would say Mitch Marner would probably be like going back to the Dallas Cowboys, because if you think about market comparisons and teams that don't get it done in playoffs, it would be the Dallas Cowboys. So I say CeeDee Lamb, and he placed them on the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, you have a star.
Wow.
You have a star quarterback in Jack Eichel, and you give him wide receiver. Now that can flip roles if Eichel becomes.
This is like Mahomes getting CeeDee Lamb.
Yes. I would feel, and then just basically flip whoever's going to be the quarterback within the two.
That's pretty substantial. Does everybody feel that's
I
a
love
good
Jack Eichel, but I think he's not quite on the Mahomes level yet. But maybe he gets there with Mitch Marner. Maybe
but the CeeDee Lamb and Marner comparisons are fair.
I think so, yeah.
In terms of talent and impact and all that.
CeeDee Lamb's a top 5 wide receiver. I think most people would say Mitch Marner's a top 5 winger in the NHL.
Wow, look at this. I know I'm ready for some salsa verde. Or who else? Everybody else?
I gotta say, I'm not just trying to agree with Jesse on everything, but both Dak and Stafford were on my short list. I ultimately went with Herbert because I think they're in more similar parts of their careers. They're both kind of in their primes. I think Herbert went 3rd overall, Marner 4th overall in his draft. So I thought that was a little more better fit for where they are in their careers.
All right, there we go. I want to thank my great panel, Paul, Case, Jesse. I'm Mike Davis. For everybody here at Fox 5, we'll see you next time here on Sin City Beat. Thanks so much for joining us.